With the recent news of the RED acquisition, there's been a lot of attention on Nikon. Why they did it, what it means for creators, filmmakers, photographers, etc.
They're gonna start sending a few people home now.
And there's these two big camps online. You have your RED enthusiasts who love RED, and you also have your RED haters, the people who think that what RED has done over the last decade has been very detrimental as far as ensuring their own proprietary technology, their patent, and basically holding the keys to the kingdom when it comes to raw compression for video. You also have two different camps when it comes to Nikon. The people who think Nikon is just a potato, and then people who are avid enthusiasts who will show up and defend Nikon every step of the way, saying the Nikon Z cameras are some of the best cameras ever made, Nikon glass is some of the best glass ever made, and you really are missing out if you're not shooting Nikon. It's almost like two different worlds. Is RED good or are they bad? Is Nikon good or is it bad? And it's really hard to digest and unpack, but I wanted to take it from my perspective because I kind of think I land somewhere in between, but definitely more on the practical understanding of just why things are the way they are. You can love it or hate it, it doesn't really matter, but I wanted to take some time to go through that and why I see Nikon the way I do. First, let me just start by saying yes, it is true, the newest Nikon Z cameras are really, really powerful. In terms of specs and performance, they go head to head with the top players in photography. You've got incredible features like filming 8K. You've got internal RAW with the NRAW codec. You've got high frame rates, great autofocus, internal stabilization, plus all the wonderful, amazing photography features that Nikon has always been known for. Nikon has finally embraced the hybrid mentality, offering both photo and video in a compact, consumer-friendly device. You've got the Z9, the Z8, the Z6 Mark II, the ZF. Nikon has an abundance of cameras at all different price points, depending on what you're looking for. And on paper, these specs do compete with Sony, Canon, Lumix, Blackmagic, Fuji. Pick your favorite. They're all offering great products nowadays. But from my perspective, Nikon came in too late to the game when it comes to all these features that content creators have been hungry for the past 5 or 10 years. When you look at how much Sony has taken in terms of market share, I really think it comes down to a few things. Sony was first to offer full-frame mirrorless, and that is huge. Yes, we had mirrorless systems from brands like Lumix, but they were always looked down upon as if Micro Four Thirds or crop wasn't really good enough. People wanted that 35mm aesthetic. And at this time, you've got Canon and Nikon just sitting on their DSLRs with the mirror box, not really thinking forward in terms of mirrorless. Canon did start to dabble with the M mount, but that basically ended up failing. And Sony really capitalized on the mirrorless E mount. Whether you personally want full frame or not, it's definitely an industry standard that a lot of people do like and prefer. They want full frame, and Sony offering that in a mirrorless camera body was a huge selling point. You can basically adapt any lens you want to mirrorless, and so that flexibility was a strong selling point. You also have Sony pushing the limits in terms of what is possible with autofocus technology. The first time I saw some of these Sony autofocus tests, my mind was blown. Perfect eye tracking and face tracking, ensuring that your subject is always in focus, a critical thing, especially when you're filming so shallow on a full-frame sensor. Those 2 points secured Sony as the leader in terms of hybrid, mirrorless video and photo acquisition. Not to mention all the other great features like high resolution, S-Log, 10-bit, low light. Sony checked a lot of those boxes, but the two that it got absolutely right was full-frame mirrorless and autofocus. Yes, it's true that Canon was right there with the RF mount, also embracing really good phase detect autofocus, so it's no surprise that Canon has maintained its market share and lead in the industry. In the modern world of content creation, video is more important than ever, so I don't think it should be a surprise that the companies that embraced video and video features first ended up rising to the top.
The cream will rise to the top.
But features alone aren't enough. It's the entire ecosystem. Sony and Canon both have cameras that range from consumer to prosumer to high-end professional, which means that if you buy a Sony E-mount lens or a Canon RF lens, you can use that glass on cameras that cost $1,000 as well as cameras that cost $50,000. The entire ecosystem works together and you can upgrade and find your place within it. If you're a YouTuber content creator and you want something affordable that does most of what you need, Sony and Canon have a solution for that. If you're a high-end cinematographer and you want a camera that has the most dynamic range and the best color reproduction, Sony and Canon have solutions for that, and the ecosystem all works together. Nikon does have more divisions than just its photography department, but but they've never had a video department either for broadcast or cinema. That means that even if you buy a Nikon Z camera that does great photography and video, and you buy Nikon Z lenses, there's no place to use them outside of that camera system. There's no Nikon cinema cameras, there's no Nikon broadcast cameras. When it comes to video, Nikon has always put photography first, but that's about to change with this acquisition. Red has always been a cinema company. They're not a photography company at all. So the pairing of Nikon and Red sort of makes sense. It's almost like a match made in heaven. Let's take this photography brand and pair it with this cinema brand, and they complete both sides of the equation. However, that's just now happening in 2024. You have countless users who are invested in Sony and Canon lenses and the entire production pipeline associated with it. And it doesn't really matter if the Nikon Z cameras have good features, they're still showing up a little bit too late.
Howdy do, fellow kids.
What?
That may not be a problem 10 or 20 years from now, but it will be an uphill battle. So while yes, I agree, it's never too late to try, they are still too late in the same way that Lumix was too late in terms of embracing full frame, as well as embracing proper autofocus. Those core features matter so much to end users that if you come too late to the party and you finally have them, it's not enough. People have already made their choice and they're comfortable using what they use. I am a big fan of the Lumix cameras, but that's in spite of the fact that for the longest time they weren't full frame and they didn't have good autofocus. I preferred some of their other features that happen to be more important to me, like shutter angle and open gate, which I've talked about plenty. If Nikon plays their cards right, this acquisition of Red could be game-changing. But there's gonna have to be a lot of decisions made along the way, and they're gonna have to get those decisions right. 8K probably is the future. I certainly wouldn't say no to it. But we've reached a point in the industry where it's more than specs on a sheet, it's the entire ecosystem. You have to take a holistic approach at the cameras and equipment that you're using to truly make the best decision. One high frame rate or one extra stop of dynamic range isn't enough to get people to throw away or sell what they're currently using in exchange for the next shiny new thing. Because after all, these brands aren't selling one product and consumers aren't buying one product. They're selling and buying into the entire ecosystem. Over time, that ends up being quite a bit of baggage that every single customer is carrying with them. And while there's nothing stopping users from selling their equipment and trading it in and getting something new, it still is that extra bit of friction that most people aren't gonna be comfortable with. You really have to offer something truly compelling, truly great, and offer an ecosystem that checks all the boxes. It isn't enough just to be a good photography camera. It isn't enough just to be a good digital cinema camera. You have to offer everything with the features people want at the price they can afford. Sony was really smart in being ahead of a lot of these changes. And to Canon's benefit, they've been able to keep up. And now it's up to Nikon and Lumix and Fuji and some of the others. If they truly want to compete, they're going to have to catch up to actually be competitive. But maybe it's okay. Not everyone can be number one. Some companies can be small and boutique and cater to their audience as long as they're profitable. And that's completely fine. But if you look back just 20 years ago, Nikon and Canon were kings. And now Canon basically owns everything and Nikon has fallen so far. I am optimistic and hopeful that with this acquisition of Red, good things can come of it. Nikon can create great products and create an entire photography cinema line that just all plays nice together. I'm hopeful that Nikon will allow other companies to license the patent around raw internal video recording a little bit easier than maybe Red had, but I don't know. I don't know how much we can rely on that as if it's guaranteed. It's a big change, and it probably was time for a change of this magnitude to happen. Things couldn't just keep going the way they were. Nikon needed to do something to change. Red needed to do something to change. And all we can hope is that this change is for the best. But let me know what you think. I'd love to hear it in the comments.